May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my Lord and my Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning, everybody. Today, I want to tell you about the Book of Esther. I assume Esther might not be a well-known book in the Bible, so let me just clarify that Esther is a person's name, not a well-known Christian holiday, Easter. This was one of the earliest sermons I ever heard in my life. It has remained in my mind ever since I first heard this story when I was living and studying in San Diego, California. I don't know why, but whenever I encounter this book after I was in Tokyo, it still remains in my mind just because it is really a mysterious and wonderful story. In fact, the Book of Esther is very unique for two main reasons. Firstly, God's name has never been mentioned, not even once in this book. In the Bible, only Esther and the Song of Songs, these are the two books where the name of God is not written. Secondly, the woman's name used in the title of the book is really rare. In the Bible, only Esther and Ruth are the only two books in which a woman's name is used in the title of the book. Have you ever wondered why a particular event happened at a particular time? Or why something you expected did not happen, even though you thought it should be reserved or appropriate? Or when you felt that things went very well, suddenly it went wrong. Personally, I have experienced these things in my life. Most of the time, I don't know the reason in the midst of the events. But looking back, I sometimes realize that all the events were actually connected and necessary to achieve a bigger purpose later in my life. The Book of Esther contains a lot of mysterious tidings. The name of God is never mentioned directly in this book, but the whole drama of the book can tell us that God is working mysteriously behind the scenes. It depicts God's sovereignty and His perfect timing everywhere at all times. Generally speaking, human beings, including Christians, do not know how our life stories and histories unfold at all. Here's a little bit of background of this story. This is from history of Old Testament, where Jews have been taken out of the homeland and exiled under the captivity of ancient Persian Empire. Esther is a young, beautiful Jewish woman. Her parents died, therefore her cousin Mordecai takes care of her as his own daughter. As you can imagine, since she is a woman in exile, she does not have much freedom. She is a minority. But both Esther and Mordecai hold faith toward one true God. Through a very strange series of events, the queen of Persia, Vasily, has been replaced. Esther was chosen as a new queen. Strangely enough, the king Xerxes, her husband, does not know she is a Jew. On the other hand, Persian people such as Haman, who is high-ranking officials in the empire, did not worship one true God. Haman became furious about Mordecai's attitude, as Mordecai does not bow down before him and pay him honor, unlike all other people do in the Persian Empire. Because of this, Haman determined to destroy Mordecai and all the Jewish people. Mordecai was really devastated when he heard Haman's plot to save their people, Jewish people, Mordecai persuaded and encouraged Queen Esther to ask the king and said, "And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Initially, Esther hesitated, but eventually she made a firm decision and said, "Go, gather all the Jews to found Susa and hold fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Esther is completely alone in the court as a Jewish woman, but she is not alone in faith. She asked all the Jewish people to pray for her dangerous action ahead. Here we can see the solidarity in her community in faith, so that she can become stronger. She has a whole community supporting her. She is technically alone, but not alone at the same time. Personally, I often feel the same way because I am the only Christian in my family. But thanks to the church community, I don't feel alone and I can become stronger. Finally, Queen Esther approached to the king without being called. This was actually not allowed at the time, and it deserved the punishment of death. But she did courageously. Then she lived, and she was a Jewish woman. Esther took this on behalf of all the Jewish people. She loved her nation and her people. She said to the king, "Grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request." How brave she was. She was calm, careful, yet courageous. God sustained and protected her. Surprisingly, the king accepted her petition and saved her and her people at the end of the story of Esther. Another highlight in this drama is about Mordecai's delayed recognition. Mordecai's contribution was actually forgotten, but later recognized by the king. In the beginning, Mordecai happened to overhear a conspiracy to assassinate the king by 2 officials. He reported this plot to Queen Esther, and she told this to the king, so the assassination attempt was thwarted. Mordecai protected the king's life, but the king never found it out until a particular time. No credit was given to Mordecai immediately, although his action certainly deserved recognition. Much later, long after this incident, the king remembered Mordecai's contribution. It was on a particular night when the king had trouble sleeping, so he read the records of his own name, in which Mordecai's previous contribution was recorded. It caught the king's attention. He was surprised to find that nothing had been given to Mordecai for this heroic deed. The king made a decision to properly appreciate Mordecai and gave him great authority. In the end, Mordecai was promoted to the second highest position after the king. He was loved and he was respected by many people because he worked for peace for his people. Indeed, God's timing is not the same as our human beings' expectations. In the Persian Empire, Mordecai and Esther were actually a minority, but they remained faithful. Here in Japan, Christians account for just about 1% of the whole population. like the Persian Empire, they worship many small idols. But wherever you are, God never forsakes his people. Even though life may look secular, like the story of Esther, God is at work behind the scenes for his people and for his greater purpose. In the same way, Mordecai and Esther were mysteriously used as his instruments to fulfill his purpose. Indeed, God has greater purposes for our lives. Even though you do not realize it, or you may have already realized it, someday you may experience that it is exactly such a time as this. The timing which human beings regard as appropriate may sometimes be delayed, but God's timing is much more appropriate. It looks unreal or disappointing at certain points in life. However, it sets aside for a bigger purpose in the future. In Mordecai's case, the recognition turned out to be much larger but later on. On the surface, all the events seem to be unconnected in this story. Yet the story unfolds beautifully under God's guidance and control. The timing of every event is mysterious, yet perfect, which is beyond human beings' understanding. Again, in the Book of Esther, God is always working mysteriously behind the scenes. If you think about and meditate on your own life, you will see how God is working mysteriously behind the scenes.